Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Jen. I'm so glad you guys stopped by for today's video. So I wanted just to chat a little bit about whether or not I've ever contemplated putting my kids into public school, or if I think that that would ever be an option for us moving forward. So just a little bit of background information in case you're new here. I have 6 kids, and when my first 3 kids were of school age, kind of just, I guess, did what most people do, and we enrolled them in school. So my 3 oldest kids did go to school, did go to a public school. It was actually a Catholic school for a few years. I ended up taking them out. My oldest was in grade 4. So it was like grade 4, grade 2, and then my 3rd oldest, she just did like kindergarten, and then we pulled them out. So that's as far as it went. Grade 4 was as far as it went. Then we started homeschooling. And you know, when I made the choice to homeschool, I talked about this in various videos because we are going on our 10th year of homeschooling here, coming up shortly. And you know, it's definitely exploded a lot more in the last few years. I would say probably around the pandemic, when kids were forced to be schooled at home, I would say that that kind of jump-started this, you know, surge into homeschooling, sort of, I think, feeling more attainable to parents, and also just not as, for lack of a better word, strange. And I think when you just talk about homeschooling now in general, or people find out you homeschool, it's a very different reaction than it was even a few years ago. You know, we were homeschooling, and I remember thinking when I first decided to homeschool, there was a lot of reasons for me making that choice. I say me, I'm the primary person who does the homeschooling, but obviously it was both my husband and I, and he's always been supportive from the start. I think, you know, he knew how much of it was going to fall on my shoulders. I'm the one who sort of approached him about it first, but he understood that the majority of what was going to be going on in terms of day-to-day stuff was going to be mainly on me. And so for me to be that passionate about it and to be willing to try doing it, he didn't have to be convinced. Bringing my kids home was like the best thing that I've ever done. Honestly, that decision right there, bringing my kids home, like I remember thinking about that last time that they were going to be leaving my house to go to school, and it was just, it was this feeling of like they are where they're supposed to be now. They're supposed to be here at home with me. And I can go through a ton of reasons why we have chosen to homeschool our kids, but I would say nearing the top, I mean, I definitely felt this sense, I felt like that this was the path God was leading me down. The conviction that I felt about being the primary person who was responsible for raising my kids and influencing my kids on a day-to-day basis, that would be a very difficult thing to do. To have the kind of influence on them that I wanted, to instill the things that were important to us, to instill those things in our kids the way that we wanted to, would be very difficult to do in those couple of hours at night that we had with them, when they were spending all their time, you know, with somebody else, with other people, with other influences. And we all know this is not about bashing public school. This is not about even like making a case for homeschooling necessarily. So please don't, if you don't homeschool your kids, I never want anybody to feel guilty or bad because that's not a choice that they have made. I will always advocate for homeschooling, and I will tell you that, again, it's one of the best things we've ever done. I would never change the decision that we made, and I would say that, like, if you could do it, I would always encourage you to do it, because there's just so much that comes out of homeschooling. It's so much more than just the academics. It's just been a blessing, like, all around. And that doesn't mean that there's not ups and downs and good days and bad days. Like, that is still all there. You know, I've done a video about like mom burnout and when you're kind of like over it and all that stuff. And that's just life, that's normal. But it's more just the big picture of it. It's just been so rewarding on so many levels. When I think about the first few years of homeschooling, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and I was really just kind of figuring it out as I went, which is the case for, you know, when you're starting anything new. And I always kind of had the mentality that I would just kind of take it year by year. Now, that didn't mean that when I thought that, it wasn't so much that I was like planning ahead of time, well, if this doesn't work out, we're just going to send them back. It wasn't so much that. It was more just like, let's just see how this year goes. And then every year we're going to reevaluate and then choose and decide when we get to that point. And I did that for a few years and shortly realized that this is just the new rhythm of our family, of our home, of our days. Just homeschooling just quickly became our normal. Like, it's funny how it never quite, obviously there's an adjustment, there's always an adjustment, but it never really felt foreign. It never really felt like we had to try that hard, because again, for me, automatically, right, bringing my kids home before we did anything, I already felt like, okay, this is where they're supposed to be. Like, while they're young and while they're under my care, I feel this conviction to be the one who is teaching them all of the things, like not just, like I said, not just the subjects, right? Like not just the math and science and all that kind of stuff, but teaching them all the things and being the influence. And if they're going to be spending this much time around people, I want it to be with family and with each other, with siblings, and to work on those relationships as well. Life skills, like there's just so many things. And that's why I'm saying like there's so many reasons why we chose to do that. And so just on that alone, it was working, and we just felt very positive and reassured that this is in fact what we were supposed to be doing and where we were supposed to be. There never really was a year, like when we'd get to the end of the year, I never actually did feel like, should we send them back or should we put them in public school? That was never the case. There was a time though when there was a bit of a transition going on between my oldest, he was finishing up grade 8 and getting ready to start high school, and we were kind of discussing like how we were going to navigate high school, like what route we were going to take in terms of his studies and stuff like that. Me and my husband kind of said to each other, he's older now, you know, we're talking high school, we've kind of made this decision for him until now, maybe we should give him the option to choose for himself whether he wants to continue homeschooling or go to school. I'll tell you right now, that was one of the most stressful times. Well, for me, honestly, I would say it was stressful for everybody. I know for sure it was stressful for me. I know for him, I think he appreciated that we had come to him and sort of offered up the option to him. I recognize that he also felt stressed out about the whole thing. Ultimately, if you don't already know, fast forward, he didn't end up going to school outside of the home. And when he made that decision, like when he came to that decision, I just remember feeling this like sigh of relief. And in that moment, I sort of like even though he made the decision that I was honestly hoping that he would make, I remember thinking, I don't want to do this again. And I realized shortly after that, we were probably not going to be giving any of our other kids that option. And you might be thinking, well, how is that fair? You gave your oldest son the option, and now you're not gonna let your other kids decide what they want to do for their education. And I feel like just like, you know, you're the one who decides in the first place whether or not you're going to homeschool your kids or you're going to enroll them in a public school or a private school or whatever it is. I feel like this is one of those things where, along with the decisions that we're making for our kids, education-wise, everybody has to do what's right for them. So if you disagree, or if this is something that you don't see a problem with, or maybe you have done that, I don't want you to feel like I don't look at anybody any differently because they choose different than I do. But for us, looking back at it, I realized that I came to that conclusion of giving him that option. It wasn't about anything other than I felt like, well, he's entering high school and maybe he needs to make this choice. And I wish I had a better reason than that, because to me that wasn't a good enough reason, but I didn't. Look, I went to regular school. I was not homeschooled. High school, we all know that high school is its own set of problems and its own level of difficulty in so many ways. But you know, the whole social thing in high school is tough on everybody. And I don't care, even if you had a fairly good high school experience, which I did. Overall, my high school experience was fine. In general, it wasn't the greatest either. And some people have it worse than others. But especially now, I mean, let's be honest. I know that, you know, there's always that generation where it's like back in the day or when I was younger, that whole thing. But school in general is nothing like it used to be when I was growing up. But high school especially is just, I feel like it's day and night. And everything that I am trying to keep as far away as possible from my children, well, schools in general, but high school, they're just like serving it up to them on a silver platter. And that is my definite opinion, and I stand by that. But I think we all know here what is being perpetuated and taught in many high schools. And honestly, I don't think that just because your child is getting ready to enter into grade 9, that they are necessarily better equipped or better off to be spending 78 hours a day surrounded by like nonsense. Because when you actually think about what's the academic portion and just how much of it is just ideologies that are trying to be forced upon our kids, I feel like whenever I think back to that moment, I'm like, I don't know what was going on with me. I just I had a lapse in judgment there somewhere. But anyway, so I just came to the decision, again, when I say I'm always including my husband in the situation. Since that time, we've talked about it. And, you know, we just came to the conclusion, just like if you were sending your kids to public school, it would just be assumed, right? Like nobody, the thing is that nobody really questions, right? Nobody really asks you when your kid is done grade 8 and they're getting ready to start their new school at the high school. Typically nobody is being asked, like, are you going to keep them home are you going to try to keep them home now, or are they still going to continue going to public school? It's just assumed, right, that that's what they're going to do. And ultimately it's the parents that are making that decision. And so that's kind of where we landed, that basically until our kids are 18, it is our job, our responsibility, our duty, our right to make these kinds of decisions for them. And we have the reasons why we decide these things. As far as education goes, we have decided that we are going to homeschool. That is just a given. So every year it's just assumed that we are going to continue homeschooling, regardless of whether they are in grade 5 or they are in grade 10. And so that's sort of where we've landed, and that's sort of how it's been ever since. So he's graduated now, and I have 2 daughters who are currently high schoolers. My older daughter, she is in grade 11, and my other daughter, she started grade 9 this year. And honestly, it never even came up. They never even said anything. The discussion just never really came up. But you know, if it did, if a child was ever like questioning or wanting to talk about it, we would definitely talk about it. But at the end of the day, we have decided within our home that my husband and I are the ones who are going to make the decision ultimately about how our kids are receiving their education. The thing is, you know, I feel like those early years of homeschooling, they really set the foundation for so much that happens in the later years, the teen years. Just the habits, the routines, the things that the kids get used to, what becomes our norm. When I'm talking about that, yes, it's the school subjects and the academics and all that. Of course, that's important. But when it comes to things outside of academics that we are trying to steer away from, I just love that we have set the tone, you know, in our house for what we allow our kids to be exposed to, points of view, which for us, it is definitely a biblical point of view on everything. And just looking at a lot of things from a biblical standpoint, it becomes part of who they are. And living that out every single day. And again, that being the main influence in their day-to-day experience. When you get to the high school ages, it's just like having been there and being there right now. I mean, I'm always kind of going to have somebody in high school, you know, for a while. It's just a whole different experience, but it's so rewarding. It's so amazing to have these conversations with your kids, to hear what they have to say about different things, to get their perspective, their point of view. And now we've moved on to, it's more like learning apologetics and stuff like that. And it's just so interesting. And I just love that I can have those moments with my teenagers to kind of hear the conversation, to have discussions back and forth. I just think about how different their day would look if they weren't at home, if they weren't being homeschooled. Yeah, that's kind of the experience that we've had. So I guess I could confidently say that going forward, we have no plans to stop homeschooling. My youngest is 6 years old, so I still have quite a few years of homeschooling kids, but as far as we're concerned, we are in this for the long haul, and the reasons that we started to homeschool are the same reasons we continue to homeschool and have led us to make that decision on behalf of our kids. You know, my oldest son, who is 18, is getting ready to start college, and I feel like, you know, he's going to a typical college, brick and mortar college. It's different though, because at 18, he's now an adult, but it's not just about him being an adult. It's about the fact that he spent his formative years, you know, with us, how he was raised, how he was taught. Now, you know, at his age, we feel very confident about him being able to go out into the world and be around people who have differing views, teachers possibly that could be saying whatever. We've laid such a strong foundation with our kids that at this point, and this is our first time, like he's our oldest, so he's the first one going to college, but I honestly feel so confident in him and his success there because of all the years that he had where we were able to invest in him. And again, not just a couple of hours here and there while he's hearing a bunch of other stuff for hours and hours on end every single day. Sometimes I feel like I have to go back and like re-explain things. It's not like my kids have never been around kids that don't share their same views, or that they haven't, like the thing is that my kids are not sheltered to the point where they don't know what's going on in the world. They do know what's going on in the world. But the difference is that we can discuss things with them like in the moment. They don't have to hear 20 million other people giving their opinion on something, or, you know, by the time they come to us, someone else has already told them how they should think or feel, or their point of view, or whatever, day after day after day. I mean, we make it sound like we are immune to that, but sending our kids to school and then expecting that they are not going to be influenced by the people they spend the most time with, I mean, I think it's safe to say that it is going to be way harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be way harder. I feel like you're more like on the defense at that point, because you're trying to like undo the things that have already been forced on your kids when you're not there. We get to lay the foundation. We get to be the ones who approach the subjects and the topics and the things going on and discuss those things with our kids and talk to them about it and look at it through God's word. And what does God say about this? How are we supposed to respond to this? Or what is our stand on this? Whatever it is. And doesn't mean that they're not going to hear differing opinions from other people. They will. But as opposed to us trying to undo that after the fact, we are the first to have those talks with them, have those discussions with them. And if they have questions, they're asking us. They're not asking so-and-so at school necessarily. So that was a learning experience. And again, I just wanted to be honest in saying that we did consider that as an option. But again, I'm so glad that it turned out the way that it did. We are definitely full-time homeschoolers, in for the long run. I don't even want to calculate how old I'm going to be by the time I'm doing that last year of homeschooling, because I don't want to like think about it. But as long as I can do it, I plan on doing it. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I just wanted to talk about it because I just wanted to share. Sometimes as homeschoolers, we do go through those times where we debate, consider. I'm glad that things turned out the way that they did. I really feel like God was just looking over the whole situation and obviously knew better than I did. But I hope you guys would consider subscribing if you're new. Don't forget to thumbs up and leave me a comment if you'd like. I'd love to have discussions in the comment section. I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.